Hi everyone, welcome back. My name is Dan, for those of you who are just joining. And today we're going to talk about the concept of ego. And this is through the lens of Jungian psychology. And the greater conversation here is the process of individuation. But this involves the ego and the persona and the shadow and the anima or animus and our archetypes, and together, all combining all of these pieces together is the process of individuation. But before we talk about that process, I want to go through each of the parts of our mind, starting with the conscious parts, or at least the parts that kind of steer into consciousness anyway. And that is our ego. And I'm going to make a separate video on it, but also persona. And I'm going to mention persona several times in this video because it essentially it attaches to the ego, and it's a fun concept and it deserves its own video. And those yellow books back there, and well, you can't see them, but I'm a big fan of the Persona games, and so the yellow books, that's Persona 4, and Persona 5 is somewhere else on my bookshelf. But I'm gonna go hard on the Persona themes. For you Persona fans out there who are watching my channel, the next video in this series should be a treat for you, because I love the game, and I've drawn a lot of inspiration from it, especially in this channel, in this series. But before we start talking about the concept of ego, we're going to talk about my ego just for a second here, and that is mostly to explain what you're going to be seeing on the screen, which is my training footage from last week. And I don't have a lot to really say about like technique or weight or anything like that. I'm just going through the program right now, guys. So it's not really what this series is about. I mean, the weightlifting stuff is, I mean, it might play a bigger role in the future. I don't know. We'll see. I am going to be drawing parallels between psychology and weightlifting. Maybe not so much in this video, but as we progress through this series, we definitely will. So I might just, use my ego as an example, right? Like the stuff you see on screen of me lifting. So I will just rattle off about my program that I'm doing. And so 5 days a week. I combine Wednesday and Thursday right now, and I leave Thursday as like a wild card day, whether I want to train nor like in the gym or just do cardio. And I'm not sure what that day is right now, but I do know that I want to have the option to take a day off from lifting in between Wednesday and Friday. And so that's why I combine Wednesday and Thursday right now, and it's easy enough to combine. So Monday, I'll put some things up so you can see, but Monday is snatch training, so that's a segment snatch plus a snatch, and I think I don't remember how many sets of that I do, but I do that. I do a snatch deadlift on a riser. It just means with a deficit, and it's floating and halting too. So floating just means I don't touch the plates in the ground in between reps, and halting means I pause or go slow through it. And then we do back squat on Monday. Tuesday is muscle snatch and power clean plus power jerk, split jerk, and push press. So upper body dominant day for sure. Wednesday is clean practice, clean and jerk practice, but we don't do any jerks. So it's a segment clean plus clean, just like the snatch thing on Monday. And then paused jerk dips. But I kind of like to just kind of like pulse them, kind of. Not really pause. I don't know. I don't know if I'm doing that right, but that's what I like to do for that. And then clean deadlift, same way as the snatch deadlift from Monday, but with the cleans. And then front squat. Thursday is tall snatch with I just use the bar for that. And then power snatch, snatch balance, and snatch push press overhead squat. So I do all of that. I do that on Wednesday. And then Thursday, I've been doing like little technical things, trying not to spend a lot of time, maybe an hour tops. And then Friday is snatch, clean and jerk, back squat. So simple program, but effective enough for me, and I like it. I like routine. It does change, and I think it will change in the near like week 8 or something. But this is week 2. No, I'm in week 3 currently. But all this footage is from last week, so I think that was week 2. Whatever it is, we're early on. But yeah, I want to get into the psychology stuff now, and to explain the concept of ego. We're going to, again, talk about my ego, but we're going to talk about a conversation I had with one of my friends where my ego is defeated. It was vanquished. And this was the result of a passionate conversation that my friend and I had. And it was me coming in hot. I started with the passion, and she's a very passionate person too. And I think when two very passionate people meet, this is what's inevitably going to happen. And her ego, I don't like to talk about other people's egos, but she's a great person. She's extremely mature, incredibly strong, and just overall like positive, happy, upbeat all the time, always has a smile on her face. And yeah, I think you know who you are if you're watching this, so thank you so much for this lesson, and for standing your ground, and for showing me yourself so that I can understand myself better. That's the idea here, guys. And so the gist of what happened is I was coming in hot. I was being really passionate about something, and she pointed this out. She's like, Dan, you have a tendency to do this, and you come in really hot. You have something you want to say, but it's just what you want to say, and it's like it has to be that way, and there's not a lot of room for anything else. And if there is, you still put your spin on it, and it's like, why don't you just hear out other people, and what do they have to think, and what is their take on this, and essentially like just soften up, right? And then it made me realize, right, like she's right. I'm being an idiot. I'm being dense. And so this is a distinction I want to make. There's a difference between a dense ego and a big ego. Because people throw around that term a lot, right? Big ego. Like this guy has a big ego. He's conceited. He's an asshole. There's nothing wrong with a mature ego. In fact, in order to progress through the process of individuation, you have to mature your ego. And so the big ego thing, that what I would call it is dense ego. And a dense ego is one that can only see a perspective through the ego. And so let's start to dive into this a little bit, because I'm using the word ego a lot and we haven't actually really given it a definition. And we will, but I want to go through a couple more examples of the way people sometimes use the word ego. So we have that big ego versus dense ego, right? The drop your ego at the door. If you ever go to the gym, sometimes you'll hear that. You'll hear someone tell that to like a new gym goer, like drop your ego at the door. And it's a great lesson. And if you can identify your ego in the gym early on, it carries into the rest of life too. The ego is like this peacock, right? Like it just wants to like just wants to like spread its wings, and it just wants to be this big beautiful thing and be the center of attention, and it's naturally competitive, and it always thinks it's right. Yeah, yeah, it does. And so in the gym, you know, it's like that part of you that wants to show off in front of people, and he wants to like look cool and have these cool videos on Instagram and you know, get that clout, right? You know, whatever the fuck that means. And that's the ego. The part of you that's saying that's telling you like, oh, I gotta look cool, like I gotta have like the right gym attire on, you know, I gotta have this angle, I gotta look this way, I gotta. That's your ego. Um, so that's another example. And then I think the one that I really like a lot is the term ego death, because a lot of psychonauts, if we can call them that, um, spiritual bros, you know, they'll say like, you know, oh man, I took a lot of LSD or mushrooms, and I had a spiritual experience, and I killed my ego, and now I'm one with Buddha or Jesus or whatever. I don't want to mention religions here, but like it's like the idea is like I'm enlightened now because I had an ego death, and it's like you never can really kill your ego. If you're here, if you're conscious, if you have a name, if you know, we have an ego. We can bring awareness to it though, and so that is that is something I want to start to move towards here in this discussion. Is well, let's go back to ego death for a second, right? A lot of it comes from like people who take a lot of psychedelics, right? And they're like, oh man, my ego is dissolved, it's gone. And yeah, that can happen. That is the psychedelic experience. Actually, is it's the word psychedelic means mind or soul revealing. It was coined by Aldous Huxley, I believe. I think I'm pretty sure that was it, Aldous Huxley. But even if he didn't coin it, the word psychedelic means mind or soul revealing. If you break down the word psyche, meaning mind or soul, and it's like the loon. Where if you look at the etymology of that word, it means to show or reveal. Um, and so that's the nature of those types of drugs. And you know, it's you don't have to take drugs to get there. You can meditate. You can use mindfulness practices. Uh, like in the last video, we talked about the idea of autosuggestion. That's a way to bring awareness to your subconscious, and you know, and that's kind of like a very vocal way. You know, you kind of speak to it. So that's one method. And a method we're going to use for this video is something called active imagination. And this is the idea of sort of assigning characters and entities and whatever you want it to be, whatever you want it to look like, to personify the aspects of our mind, like our ego, or a persona, and that's what I want to discuss here today. Is what would the ego look like in that picture, in comparison to everything else? What is the ego? And so I want you to think of this. Think of this large sprawling kingdom with a castle in the middle, right? And there's castle walls and gates, and we don't have to spend too much time in the castle right now and what it looks like, but think of this big large kingdom, and there's a castle, and leading out of the castle it leads to a gate, right? And the gate opens, and in that gate, by that gate, you know, whether it's like a guard tower or a post right next to the gate, there sits a knight, right? And it doesn't have to be a knight necessarily. This is the persona that we're going to use for this video, is a knight, but it can be essentially any class that you want it to be. We're gonna use a knight because I want this persona to have a sword and a shield. The sword and the shield is essentially the ego. And what I mean by that is this is the force that we use to create a reality for ourselves. We fight for ourselves. And think about that. When we grow up, we want to make a name for ourselves. We want to be someone. We want to do something. You can't just sit around and do nothing. You have to get a job. You have to get a degree. You have to make friends. You don't have to do any of this stuff. But like I said, guys, the ego wants some attention. It's like the peacock. It wants to flock around. It wants to look at me. I'm important. And so we do things to make ourselves important. And so that's like the sword part. And then the shield is like when you feel like passionate about something, right? Like my friend and I, when we were discussing and having this conversation, she had her shield up and she was holding it strong. She was protecting her character. She was protecting her kingdom, her castle. And I was just unrelenting. I was just like attacking. But she had, and we'll get a little more into this later in the series, but she had the backing of her kingdom behind her. So there was no way I was getting through. It was impenetrable. And so that's why I lost the conversation. I lost the debate, is because she was always in the right. And that had nothing to do with her ego. The only thing her ego was doing at that point was defending herself, and it was that was just a result of me being an idiot and being dense and not trying to hear her and understand her. And eventually I put my sword and my shield away. Or I should say I put my sword away. I still had my shield up because I was still trying to defend my reality. But I put my sword away. I stopped attacking her. I let her in. And I walked my knight back to the gate. And what I mean by that is our knight, our ego, which is like our persona and our ego. The knight is like our ego and our persona. But those two things together kind of form us as a character. And ideally, guys, we upgrade our sword and our shield through the castle, through our kingdom, right? That's how we become a better character. Essentially through our mind. Like yes, we have to learn things in the real world, but all of our best lessons, they come from within, from ourself, with a capital S. And so what am I getting at here, guys? We have the inner kingdom, right? This is essentially our mind. This is where we come from. This created the knight. The knight was born here. And it's his job to navigate the outer world, right? And that's the real world. That's where we are. That's what you see. That's what this is. That's what you're looking at right now. But this isn't real. The internet is not real, by the way. And so okay, damn, what are you getting at? Knights, castles, swords, shields. So we go to sleep every night, right? And we have to, because the body requires us to sleep. But what if the mind requires us to sleep too? I mean, in fact, it does. But why? Like, what's happening there? Where does the ego go there? It kind of ceases to exist. In some ways, I mean, we're not there anymore. We're not conscious. We're sleeping. And so that is when the knight sort of naturally comes back to the line. But we have a problem today, concerning problem, and this is sort of the lesson that I learned from my friend, right? Is she pointed out too. She was like, you can't stop looking for the differences in us. Like, start. The reason that I feel the need to dominate conversations, to start them, to end them, to interject, to correct, to control everything about it, is because of the internet. Because I don't feel like I fit in. Because I don't know anyone else who has these concepts, or at least I didn't until recently. And now I do, and now I know there are other people out here who are interested in this stuff. But what happens, guys, is we over-identify with the internet. Our ego, our knight, leaves the gates. He's gotten sufficiently leveled up to this point, whatever age he is, 20, 25, 30 years old, and leaves the gates, and he's like, my sword and shield they're developed enough, and I have a good enough map of this land. I can navigate it. I don't need these orders anymore. I'm gonna go rogue and just do my own thing. Well, guess what's out there, guys? And I don't know how many of my viewers have played World of Warcraft or Warcraft, or have read the books, or have played Hearthstone, or anything like that. But there's a character in it, and his name is Arthas Menethil. And Arthas was the crown prince of Lordaeron. He was a paladin of the Silver Hand. He was righteous. He was a good person. And all of us start off as good people. But then he was corrupted by an evil blade, and there's a lot of lore that goes into his story, and a lot of it has to do with grief, and we'll get into that later in the series, and what grief actually looks like and what it does to our inner kingdom. But the point I want to make about Arthas is that he took on this blade, and he swore he would do anything to save his people. And as you say, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, guys, right? And so he takes on this blade, gives him infinite power, and makes him immortal, but guess what? It steals his soul. And he ends up using that blade to kill his father. And he evolves from a paladin into a death knight, into the Lich King, and he commands the undead. And so, guys, what no, yeah, well, I have to make the connection here, I realize, but just realize the sheer power of Frostmourne and how enticing it is and what it promises. Now, the Frostmourne is the internet. The internet is a sword of infinite power, and it makes us feel infinite too. It makes our ego feel infinite, not us. There's a difference. There's a separation there. And the more we start to identify, the more we start to wield Frostmourne and indulge in its powers. This is social media, guys. This is the internet. This is the mental health crisis that started in 2011 when smartphones and high-speed internet and social media all came together in Instagram. It's Frostmourne. And it's corrupted so many of our knights to an alarming degree. And you don't have to use this imagery, guys. You don't have to. But there's a parallel here that I'm drawing, and it's I don't have a psychology degree. And so I challenge all of you, because the function of the ego is to test reality. I challenge all of you to try to use your imagination. Go into a quiet place, write these things down, and then try to go about your next day and think about this. Try to apply it. Try to see if you're interested. If you don't care and you think I'm a lunatic, that's fine. That's okay. But I don't have this psychology degree, and again, this is a lone wolf weightlifting. So my channel, this started with my therapy journey and my weightlifting journey, which is all about my ego, right? So why the fuck should you give a care about Dan's ego? If you're a family member, excuse my French, I'm sorry about that. If you're a family member, you probably do care about Dan and his character and his ego. But if you don't know Dan, then, or if you know Dan, but you just know him like through these videos and maybe you've had a few passing conversations with him, then no, I don't expect you to care about the weightlifting or the therapy journey, right? But I do expect you to care about that back there. What's behind the knight? What's behind him? What's behind the character? What's the story, right? We all have a story. And the idea of individuation, the idea of active imagination and all of this is to transform our story into a myth. We're all part of a greater myth, guys, whether we see it or not. And so I don't have the psychology degree, but I do have an IT degree, and IT used to mean information technology, and in my head, it still does. But my degree isn't information technology, it's internet technology. Because now, the internet is more important than information, I guess. And they taught us about social media and cloud computing and all these great things, but they did not warn us. Not in the way they should have. And no one will. And it's not a problem for our ego. Our ego loves this. But our mind, our self, that's the original connection that we had with everyone, guys. That is where we all connect. Truly connect. Not this bullshit on the internet. That back there. Our minds, our imagination, our creativity, our art, the things that we produce, we can communicate these on the internet, and that's a wonderful thing, and that's what I like to see. But the internet can corrupt us quite easily, and I've seen it. I've seen it happen firsthand. And our younger generation who are born into this, it's going to be even easier for them to fall prey. And I think we can all agree that making a better future for our kids, our nieces, our younger generations, our future generations, is not. We can all get together behind that, guys. So acknowledge the internet for what it is. I'm not saying don't use it. I'm not saying don't try to take advantage of its power. I mean, that's what I'm doing right now. I'm not a hypocrite. I'm saying treat it and respect it for what it is. It's Frostmourne. It has a godly presence on this planet, on this earth, on everything. It's everywhere. Everywhere. Just take a second and think about that. That's not normal. That wasn't normal 40 years ago. And you can have this conversation, just walk your knight back to the castle walls, open up that gate, and the next time you approach someone, you know, who's like 30 years old or older, like millennials, anything before that generation, who was not born directly into this. I'm not trying to just, you know, separate us by generations, but talk to people who were around before the internet exploded and have a conversation with them. Talk to them. And then you'll see how you can actually connect with people. If you guys like this stuff, if you guys like Jungian psychology, active imagination, any of these concepts, leave me a comment, let me know. I love talking about it too. That's why I'm making a whole series on it, and I draw a lot of inspiration from the people I talk to, as you could see from the conversation I had with my friend. And so that is the ego. Next we will be going into persona, which ties into the ego too. So until next time, guys, thank you for watching.